Chargers general manager Tom Telesco sat down for his pre-draft press conference on Tuesday and talked about trading up and trading down in the upcoming draft. And he also said he thinks it's probably unrealistic for the Chargers to move up in round one because they're missing their second round pick, or maybe it's all a smokescreen.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers together for over 6 seasons, but we're heading into our 5th season as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. What's up, guys? Welcome into the show, and thank you for making us your first listen today. And as always, to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and also follow the show for free on all platforms wherever you get your podcast from. And on today's show, we're going to be getting into general manager Tom Telesco opening up as much as someone like Tom Telesco opens up in the pre-draft process, where he has very little to gain and almost everything to lose when he steps up there as far as strategically as he approaches this draft that the Chargers absolutely have to get right. So we're going to talk about what his comments were, because even though he says little, sometimes you can read between the lines and at least try to pretend you can get into the mind of Tom Telesco. And he talked about him saying unrealistic that the Chargers trade up. Is that a smokescreen, or maybe they trade up at a different point of the draft, but not having that second round pick is definitely an important part of that. We're also going to talk about the plan for the offensive line. He says they have some contingencies in-house and out of house, and they also signed a utility depth offensive lineman in Will Clapp that we'll talk about a little bit in segment 2, and then wrap up the show with his comments on Jerry Tillery's 5th-year option, and also Kenneth Murray being out through OTAs. And one reporter bringing a little heat to Tom Telesco for one of his poorer draft classes. We'll talk about his reaction to that as well. But today's episode is brought to you by Blue Nile. This Mother's Day, give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off of $500. Just use the code LOCKEDON at checkout. So, David, Tom Telesco spoke, and there's one thing we always reference with Tom Telesco, especially during this time of the year, and it's tight-lipped Tom, right? He's not going to say anything. He's going to speak in riddles. Somebody brought up on Twitter a quote that he had, saying like, I like to tell the truth. I'm a Catholic, or something along those lines. Like, maybe he does like to tell the truth, but it's really more of just what he's leaving out probably than what is actually, what he's actually saying. But one of the interesting things he did say, though, was talking about trading up in this draft. He first of all said, like, multiple times now at this point, he feels like they'll be able to get someone there. He doesn't think that they'll have to move. But at least that's what he's saying at this point. And I understand that. And that's what you'd want to say if you wanted people to think that you're good with staying there, right? And you can kind of take it or leave it, the offer for them to trade up with someone else potentially, right? That's all in play because it is smokescreen season, David. But also with the Khalil Mack trade, trading that second round pick does make it a lot harder, because if you do want to jump up a substantial amount in the first round, it could cost a second round pick depending on how far you're trying to move up. But it doesn't necessarily mean that's exactly what it costs. It doesn't mean they're absolutely out of it there, David. So I think even though he's saying it's unrealistic, I'm still not going to totally rule it out.
Yeah, I mean, how can you? I mean, that's the whole point of Tom Telesco's responses and all of these questions that he's being peppered with in this press conference is you kind of just get bits and pieces. I mean,
but it's peppered with a logical point too, right? Because It's like the second round pick is very logical, but it's like, but I also can't trust you.
Yeah, no question about it. You definitely can't, because, if one thing we know about Tom Telesco during his tenure is that you don't know what Tom Telesco is thinking until he does what he does. And I mean, that is valuable from a personnel, decision maker standpoint, because you don't want to show your cards, especially in front of, before the draft. You don't want to give anybody out there any indication on what you are trying to do. But thinking about this logically, pragmatically, the Chargers really don't have the draft capital this year to be able to make any kind of significant trade up. So that would mean that they would probably have to dip into next year's draft capital. And we're talking probably early on first or second round picks. And, obviously this Khalil Mack trade withstanding, they don't really like to deal their early picks. So I think with this specific situation, Daniel, I do think the likelihood of them trading up in this year's draft, especially in the first round, I think is very, very low.
Yeah, I think you're right too. And I mean, I think it seems likely, or obviously, because that's all he's ever done. He's only
Right.
traded up. He's never traded back. That's never been an option for him. But we have seen him move up for someone like Melvin Gordon or even Manti Tao or Jeremiah Tauchu or most recently Kenneth Murray, right? So they haven't all worked out always. I mean, you could argue that maybe none of those guys you should have moved up for, right? But the one thing about Tom Telesco too is the intel he's getting, and knowing where guys are going to go and thinking he does. And that's what he said he spends a lot of time doing right now. He's trying to figure it out. And last year, when you get Rashawn Slater at 13, it's like, seems like he knew. He didn't try to trade up. He didn't get, anxious or anything like
Better
that.
than
And
me. I
same
was
thing with
telling him to
Justin
trade
Herbert
up.
too. And it's a little funny too, like when I hear people say, like the reporters and stuff, because I'm kind of just waiting for him to like drop the, yeah, you could say that, but like also, what did everyone think about Justin Herbert before I waited and drafted him 6th overall, right? You know what I mean? Just like drop
Right?
just totally dunk on him, because it's like, yeah,
Boom.
it's like, okay, well, I mean, you still could have let Justin Herbert get taken by the Dolphins, or any of those other teams. But like
Yeah.
at the same time, when you have that in your back pocket, it definitely carries a certain amount of cachet, obviously.
Ultimate trump card. Absolutely.
Literally almost untradeable player is what he
No,
drafted. So it's going to buy
absolutely.
you some leeway. But he did talk about trading down. He said, we're always open to it, even though they've never actually done it. It's certainly something that you have to look at. It's an option every year, and it'd certainly be an option this year. A lot of it comes down to who is on the board at that point. How far back do you want to go? How many players do you have left at that spot? There are a lot of benefits of moving down. You can pick up an extra pick. You may be able to pick up an upgraded pick, and you have to kind of weigh who's there when you're making those decisions, basically, is what he was saying. But the thing is, David, as well, is he also said, you know, you have to know who's there, and who's there could change it. And he obviously feels like there's going to be some good players there.
Yeah.
But he also said, like, hey, we're probably not going to get a second round pick. Like
Right.
for as far back as you'd have to drop back in the first round to get a second round pick makes it very, very unlikely that you're going to recoup that. But still, I mean, especially with what the situation looks like at 17, there's obvious benefits. You would hope that even though he's never done it, he'd be open to it in the right situation.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, and he is open to it. I mean, I think the one thing
Even an extra
that
third round pick would be great, right? Like,
absolutely,
yeah.
yeah. Add another top 100 pick, please. I mean, the Chargers have a lot of different things that they need help with, and obviously, your biggest and best options for being able to attack that is those higher draft picks, those top 100 picks. But what I was going to say is Tom Telesco did say, you don't really talk about trades, too much before the draft, but you do call to try to set things up potentially. And I think a lot of that could be, situationally based as far as trading back is concerned. It's like, hey, if any of these guys that we have ranked on our board is not available there, what are your thoughts on potentially, being a dance partner on trading back? So I think those are the kind of calls that you field. And I think this year, he's made it pretty clear that he thinks there's a very good chance that there's going to be a player there at 17 that they're going to want to say or want to pick. But again, obviously he would say that too, because he doesn't
Yeah.
want to tell anybody what is on his mind and how his board is actually situated. One thing he did let slip a little bit, though, is that he only really has 17 to 18 players with first round grades on them. So, as far as trading back, there's only, so far that you can trade back to where you feel like you're going to get the value for the player that you're trying to select.
Great point, honestly. I mean, I think that's the thing, is just, how many of those 18 to 20 players that he has in his first round grades, you know, are you willing to move back for, right? If there's 5 guys there that you still have first round grades on at that point, because the
Yeah.
first part of the draft is so wild, and
Right.
quarterbacks are also going to be a big part of that. He said, yeah, it'd also be nice if 4 quarterbacks got drafted before we draft
Highly
his.
unlikely, but
Right, exactly. But like even that, David, right? That's a great thing to say in smokescreen season when
it
you want people
is.
to think you're perfectly cool with staying. Because now when he
Yeah.
does pick up that phone and people say, hey, we want pick 17, he's like, but I only have 18 first round players. So like, am I going to be able to get one of those guys if I trade back with you at 20 or 25, whatever the pick is,
Yeah.
right? So it's all a big game, and you never know. This is the cat and mouse
Always.
that always happens in draft season. And Tom Telesco is known for having one of the better poker faces around the league, at least as far
Indeed.
as, I've heard of it. The other guys that seem to be a little bit more forthright, Tom Telesco is going to
Not
say
at
as
all.
little as he possibly can. But he did talk about the offensive line and some of the options that they could go with there. And they did add an offensive lineman in Will Clapp, who has some ties to the Chargers' current coaching staff. So we'll talk about that great social media name too, right? That is something that is going to get a lot of play and already has gotten a lot of play on
Yes.
Twitter. So we're going to talk about his plans for the offensive line coming up right after this. But I think what you want is just, for Tom Telesco, if he can get the first round perfect again, trading up or trading down, it's going to take this team to where it needs to go, or at least be a big step in that right direction. But if you're looking for the perfect piece of jewelry to make the special moment that you want to for your significant other or your mother with Mother's Day coming up, the only place to go is BlueNile.com. At Blue Nile, you can celebrate all of life's special moments, from creating the custom engagement ring of her dreams to gifting a classic and timeless jewelry piece at all the prices you won't find at a traditional jeweler. BlueNile.com is the original online jeweler since 1999. They've helped millions of couples create the perfect engagement ring, something I definitely know a lot about. And Blue Nile is committed to ensuring that the highest ethical standards are observed when they're sourcing the diamonds and their jewelry. They also have expert advice 24/7 that includes 30-day returns. The price guarantee on Blue Nile is you contact Blue Nile to compare competitors' diamonds against one of theirs. In most cases, they can meet or beat that price. And right now, guys, Mother's Day is right around the corner. So this Mother's Day, give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry at FromBlueNile.com. And Locked On Chargers listeners get $50 off of $500. This podcast exclusive is only good through Mother's Day, so make sure you guys get in on it now. Use the promo code Locked On, all caps, one word. That's promo code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today. All right, David. Well, we talked about what Tom Telesco had to say as far as moving in the draft. And I think this year, it feels like we've talked about moving up and moving down more than we potentially have in other drafts. Or maybe it just seems like that because it's always something, especially when you're right in the middle, right?
It's always fun, though. It's always fun to talk about trades.
Well, I think when you're in the middle, right? If you're the number one overall pick, like I don't think anyone wants to trade Jacksonville for the number one overall pick because there's no consensus dude there right now, right? And there's no consensus good quarterbacks that teams would obviously want to trade up to secure those services, because the one thing with quarterbacks specifically is you get that 5th-year option, right? Is when you have you hit on that pick, you want them as long as possible. So I think that's obviously a big thing for people. But that's more trading from the second round, getting back into the first round. You'd have to give up a lot to get to the second round to the Chargers pick at 17. But one of the things that Tom Telesco was asked about during his press conference was the offensive line. And I thought it was interesting what he had to say about it. He said, a little bit like free agency, you can only bring in what's going to be available. Same thing with the draft. You can only draft what's available. We're certainly not going to force anything. So I think with that, David, what I'm hoping that means is we're not going to take a right tackle just to take a right tackle. And I mean, he could be kind of assuming in that situation that Trevor Penning's gone. It's hard to know specifically. But when something like that is said, it makes me think, okay, well, they're not just going to take Trevor Penning, right, or someone like that hypothetically just because they have a need at right tackle. Obviously, that sounds good. You always want to say best player available. But in this scenario, that's what I'm hoping it means.
Yeah, exactly. I think that, there's a couple of guys in the first round that you feel like are home runs, at least at the offensive tackle position.
Or Zion Johnson.
Right. Or Zion Johnson, obviously, and on the interior, everyone who listens to the show should know that we are all for Zion Johnson. That would be an awesome pick. But, I think on the other side of the token here with Trevor Penning, I think this kind of alludes to that specifically. Is just that, hey, he's available. I mean, he has the nasty mean streak, but he's not really a first, he's just not there yet. He has some distinct issues that really need to be cleaned up for him to be successful at the next level. So I hope that is, the thought process with the Chargers is you don't say automatically, oh man, Storm Norton had 60 pressures and 9 sacks that he gave up last year. I got to get somebody. No matter who it is, it's got to be at 17. You can't have that mentality. And I think when you hear Tom Telesco speak, I don't think that he does. He's always very cognizant of, looking at the value right now, but also projecting what that player is going to be for you later on down the road.
And more importantly, he hasn't drafted very many good offensive linemen. So I think
That
that's
is
another
true.
tough thing. You definitely don't want him, reaching for maybe a suspect prospect. That's why the Zion Johnson thing is so alluring, is just because like the dude's gonna be good. I think Dan Brugler had just had him on one of his most likely players to be Pro Bowlers as a rookie. Like that's how good that dude is. And if you just know you're getting a good offensive lineman out of that, that's just such an
sign me up, man.
enticing offer to decline. And he might not even be there with all the hype surrounding him. All these guys we talk about just get so much hype, and then they're not options anymore, and it's sad.
And if you wonder why we talk about offensive linemen so much, just go ahead and ask Phillip Rivers what his offensive lines were like when he was playing for the Chargers, okay?
Or Andrew Luck before he retired, or Russell Wilson before he wanted to get traded to the Broncos, and look at the mess we're in now, right? Because Seattle wouldn't address their offensive line, now we have Russell Wilson in the division. So thanks a lot, Broncos. Or thanks a lot, Seahawks, I should say. We've seen it happen too many times, including with Phillip Rivers. But when he talked about what they were doing and kind of where they felt like they had needs, because he was asked specifically, I think it was Gilbert Manzano was asking about, hey, are you planning on bringing guys in on the right side of the line? Because that's where the obvious holes are at this point. Yeah. And what he said was, we got different plans in-house, different plans looking forward. If it wasn't from in-house, we'll kind of see how it plays out. And that sounds confusing as hell. So what I'll say to that is, he's basically saying like, hey, there's, different things it seems like we could do with the guys we have right now than potentially, the plan that you saw play out last year. Or maybe that in-house plan is like Trey Pipkins and Storm Norton at right tackle and Brendan Hymas at right guard, and they feel like it's good. We're hoping not, but it also could mean moving, Matt Feiler to right tackle. And then Daniel Popper from The Athletic actually said that he thought the out-of-house options that the Chargers had on the offensive line was potentially bringing back Oday Abushi. But I do think at this point, David, though, with what the Chargers have in draft capital, if they want to wait and take a guard in the middle rounds, and that's the direction they go, and they want to put Matt Feiler at right tackle, or they want to bring back Oday Abushi, like there's a good chance we feel a lot better, I think, about the offensive line after the draft, after we kind of see how it all plays out, even if they don't necessarily take a tackle with the 17th overall pick.
Well, I mean, the only thing we can really say, concretely is that they have at least entertained the notion of moving Matt Feiler out to right tackle. I mean, they've said that.
Positional flex.
Right. They haven't really said that about anybody else. So I think you can kind of read in between the lines and say that that's kind of what they're talking about there. They're not going to be forced to, be able to have to select any particular type of player or position because they have that ace in the hole with Matt Feiler and his ability to play right tackle at a very high level, which he had already illustrated in his NFL career. But Oday Abushi, I think, is the natural person here as far as the out-of-house options, Daniel. I mean, he's a guy that's been familiar. He's not going to cost a lot coming off of an injury. And I feel like, they're trying to kind of wait and see what happens in the draft to determine if they have to make that move or not. I feel like personally, just bring him back anyway. I mean, it's not going to cost you a lot of money. And I feel like if he is able to go out there and play, I think it just improves your offensive line unit. And I'm all for adding dudes that are going to improve that all important position group.
When you just have no idea what to expect from Brendan Hymas at this point, because last year what you saw was that the Chargers weren't comfortable putting him in there throughout the entire season. Yeah. So I think the one thing that I think we did learn today, at least about the offensive line that could change things a little bit in the draft, is they went out and signed offensive lineman Will Clapp, who, going to admit, I hadn't heard of, before the Chargers signed him today, nor really should I, because didn't play very much with the Saints, but was there for 4 seasons and now is coming to the Chargers on a deal. But I think, David, obviously, one thing from this that we can see is that this is going to be a depth piece for the Chargers.
Absolutely. Will Clapp here, a former pupil of the new Chargers offensive line coach, Brendan Nugent from the New Orleans Saints. Will Clapp only played 35 games, and he only started 7 of them, okay? He's a former 7th-round pick. He does have some experience playing guard and playing center, but he is definitely brought in to add depth. He is probably not going to be, in the running for a starting position. This is a depth signing. I mean, and the Chargers needed to do this. They needed to bring in more bodies, and obviously the connections have been a theme throughout this offseason, so it makes sense that Brendan Nugent would probably advocate for a guy that he has already a relationship with and understands how he plays the game.
Absolutely, and I like the signing because this is probably in response to the Chargers letting go of Scott Quessenberry, right? So now you have a backup to Corey Linsley, who needed a backup for a game last season. Obviously, this season isn't going to have the COVID restriction, so if he stays healthy, it won't happen again. But we were talking before the show, this lessens the need to feel like you have to take a developmental center in this upcoming draft that's like the future center, right? Because Linsley has 4 more seasons on his contract. If you can find somebody for cheap that's going to give you some versatile depth on the inside that's also up to, in the know on the playbook, having played in a similar system before, and having coaches who are able to kind of, give him the credibility that you would need for someone like this. As a 7th-round pick, good for him, being able to sign a second contract for sure. But I mean, Will Clapp, it's going to be so funny to hear everything that comes along with that name. And I think it is nice because at least it gives you, it basically is insurance that you'll never have a Senio Kelemete situation again, right? You'll have somebody who knows the system and can come in and fill
I
in.
don't ever want to hear that name again, Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, so just to give some examples, he gave up 27 pressures and 301 pass blocking snaps in his 4 seasons so far. It's not a lot of snaps, obviously.
Right.
And it's kind of a lot of pressures, but at the same time, you think about Kelemete giving up double digits in one game in which he had like maybe 50 pass blocking snaps. Not terrible, right? Not good.
Right.
Just a depth piece, a classic backup piece. But I am excited to see all the Will Clapp jokes that we get to hear. But I can tell you one thing: I will clap as many Built Bars that are ever put in front of me because Built Bars are my favorite protein bar. And right now, I have huge news on the Built Bar front because not only can you get the Built Bars, the classic protein bars that taste like a candy bar with great flavors on them, not only can you get the Built Bar Puffs, David, where you're getting the first ever protein infused marshmallow with great flavors like cinnamon churro, you can now get the Built granola bars. And I'm a big granola bar guy. And right now, Built Bar has granola bars, the Built granola bars that you can get in peanut butter flavor. You can get in white chocolate berry flavor. I'm a big white chocolate guy. You can also get, I think, chocolate coconut is another one of the flavors too. But I am all in, and Built, I'm patiently waiting for my box to come in the mail. I can't wait to check these ones out. They also have mixed boxes where you get to try everything. You get to try all the different flavors, and you will find one that you like. I can promise you that. And, you know, David, the best part of it is it's going to fit on pretty much every diet because most bars have 130 calories or less. Most bars also have, you know, less than 4 grams of sugar and less than 4 grams of carbs. And those are the big things I know people are trying to look out for these days, while being packed with 17 grams of protein. So check out the Built Bars and the new Built Granola Bars. Get them while they're hot before they sell out because that sounds delicious. And might have to just buy some before my package even arrives. I'm just assuming a package is going to arrive at my house. Wishful thinking, but you guys can save some money on Built Bars. If you go to built.com, you can use the promo code LOCKED15 since you listen to this show, and you can save 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. I realized that my transition game was a little lacking, so I had to bring it hard with Will Clapp right there. So definitely something that I had to get back to. But David, we have to get back to Tom Telesco's press conference and talk about what he had to say about Jerry Tillery, which I totally forgot to tease in the last segment. So Jerry Tillery's 5th-year option was something that Tom Telesco was asked about. And it's a tricky question, David, because obviously he has been underwhelming to this point in his career. And with a 5th-year option, you have to make that decision before you get to see the 4th year out of their player. Yeah. So when you have a guy like Jerry Tillery who has been maybe a little bit more slowly developed right at this point in his career, hasn't gotten to the heights where you think that he should be, it's tough because like you'd love to sign it after the season, but it's also going to be like $9 million. And I think one thing we saw in this offseason, you know, it's somewhere around there. The one thing we saw in this offseason is the top of the line defensive tackles in this draft or this free agency class were going for about $10 million. And a lot of those guys are at least an average, you know, annual average value. A lot of those guys are about the same age as Jerry Tillery is going to be, David, when they end up needing to sign that contract. So I think the biggest question is just now that they have Sebastian Joseph Day, now that they have Austin Johnson, you know, and they have, you know, some rotational pieces, but maybe not any stars, I would say, at that position. Do you think it's less likely now that Telesco picks up that option?
Yeah, I think it's pretty safe to discern here that with the moves that the Chargers have made to address the defensive line, you know, with those 2 guys in particular, and just some of the depth that they've acquired, that I think it is a lot less likely that the Chargers would pick up that 5th-year option, especially because, hey, just because they don't pick up that option does not mean it precludes them from signing him to an extension if he comes out and plays all world football. Not saying that that's going to happen because, you know, unfortunately with Jerry Tillery, we've only seen some flashy plays in spurts. That's what it's been for him. The lack of consistency has been the biggest question that he has yet to answer in his NFL career. So until he is able to show that on a consistent basis, right, I don't think the Chargers right now are in a position to where they feel like they have to pick up his 5th-year option.
One, he and Kenneth Murray kind of have not like similar stories, but like I think the same probably excuses, right? Or reasoning is probably made for both of them
Yeah,
because Jared Tillery came in with a shoulder injury, both of them did, right? And had to kind of
right.
rehab that going into their rookie season, didn't get a true off season. And, got off to a slow start and didn't get a ton of snaps that first year. And then the second year, he was getting played at edge rusher for a decent portion of the season, kind of out of nowhere. Maybe that stunted his growth a little bit. And then last year, he was obviously transitioning to Brandon Staley's defense. And even though an underwhelming season for sure, but his best season by far,
Yeah,
right? And I think that's the tough thing about the Chargers interior defensive line unit in general is just like you still don't have a pass rusher,
yeah.
right?
Not a
And
lot of pass rush.
maybe
Yeah,
at least he easily has the most proven pass rushing out of any of your interior defensive linemen. And obviously, we're talking about this dude as someone who is disappointed so far in this career.
yeah.
So, how happy can you really be about that? We will, as the decision comes closer, talk about what we would do on that fifth year option. Maybe you've listened to the show enough to hear you feel like you know, but the only way to find out is to actually listen because you don't know. So, make sure you guys check back in with that. But we do have to talk about Kenneth Murray because one thing that did get talked about was Kenneth Murray's ankle surgery, which would not be elaborated on. He would not open up
At
on
all.
anything more than that. Uh, Basically just said, you hope your players don't have to get surgery, but it got to a point with him where trying to heal it, naturally was not working. Then they had to give him surgery. But he did say that as far as when to expect him back, I don't expect them back during OTAs, he said. So we'll have to go from there. So OTAs goes through June 9th, as me and David looked up before the show. So that means he's going to be out at least through the beginning of June, more than likely. And I think the hard thing is, David, especially with how what's the right word? Discreet, I guess, the Chargers have been with their injuries and opening up about that kind of stuff. I mean, we've seen so many injuries where, we never have a clear understanding of how long the player is going to be out or anything like that. So I think that's probably the floor is the end of OTAs. But it just seems like now it's at a point where it's like, okay, well, it's just going to be another reason, another part of him not being able to live up to those first round expectations.
Yeah, I mean, it's a built-in excuse, right? I mean, I think that's the only way you can look at it. But I mean, after so long, how many excuses can there be afforded, right? How many can you actually put out there before you have to say a spade is a spade? I mean, this might be just what Kenneth Murray is going to be, and obviously we don't hope for that. We want to see a healthy Kenneth Murray go out there and play his best football and tear the house down and be an absolute menace as a linebacker and go out there and smack people, but unfortunately, we haven't seen that. And so I think that at this point in time, Kenneth Murray, this is the biggest year for him. This is the absolute biggest season of his career. So hopefully he is able to come back healthy and really show what he is capable of doing. Because yes, the excuses are plentiful, and there are some good reasoning behind those. But I think there comes a point in time, Daniel, where it's put up or shut up.
It is, right? And obviously last year, it's like you kind of have to throw it away because supposedly he was dealing with the ankle all season, right? So you're supposed to
Right.
just disregard it. His first season, he said he never felt comfortable in Gus Bradley's system, but like it's so like of course you want him to be better, right? And you want
Right.
to believe that with his athletic ability that he can get to be used usefully on the Chargers defense. We just haven't seen it. And then
Right.
that's the hardest thing is just banking on someone taking that big of a step because like he was by far the worst linebacker in the NFL last year as far as average depth of tackle, how far down the field he was making tackles because the instincts and the reads weren't there and the
Yeah.
reaction wasn't there. And that's the
Yep.
things that would worry me the most. Obviously, physically, you wanted to be out there, and if your ankle is hurt, it can definitely take a step away from you.
Oh yeah.
But with every counting injury and everything that all of these, things that are adding up, like it just seems less and less likely as much as you want to hope, hey, Brandon Staley can figure it out with this dude. But I would say, I mean, it doesn't seem like someone being out through OTAs would necessitate the Chargers, if they're basing it just on his injury, adding a linebacker, having it much higher up in the draft than they already do. I think more of it is just like how much do they believe in him to the point where they may feel like they don't need to add more to that position. That I think is the more concerning of the questions. But one of the things I did want to talk about was Tom Telesco getting not scolded, right, but having a bad draft class kind of brought back up to him by Joe Reedy of the Associated Press. He was asked about the 2018 draft class because now there's only one player from that class that's still on the team. It's Darwin James, which obviously that's a very nice player to have on your team, right? Like you could have dunked on with that one. It's like, yeah, well, I guess Joe, the rest of the guys didn't end up with the Chargers still, but I did end up with Darwin James. So what do you have to say about that?
Right.
No, but Joe Reed did a very delicate job of asking, like, hey, do you think that holds up to the league standards, having none of those guys sign a second contract, basically as a team that wants to promote from within and re-sign your own guys? And this is what Tom Telesco had to say, and he answered it like this. Well, if you take that 1 year, I think it would be. Yeah, I think you got to hopefully look at a little bit more of a broad base than that. But you're right. I mean, you're right. It just seems that the players we hit on, we don't really think about, and the players we miss on, I'm talking about us. The players we miss on, we just trying to figure out, hey, where did we miss? It's a pretty big process of going through what went wrong. And he said, obviously, they would like to have hit on more in the draft process, certainly, but that's just the way it is. It's not easy drafting players. Yeah, that's true. It is not. And it is all, throwing darts at a dartboard. It is all a crapshoot at one point. But a very fair question, David, because when you're not re-signing any of those players, right, and you want to be that team, that is something that you kind of have to answer for. And it didn't seem to work out in those places, but I do think right now, more than ever in the Tom Telesco era, I have faith that at least it seems like he's evolving. At least it seems like Brandon Staley's input has been a very positive influence on the way he's approaching some of these things. Maybe with a few exceptions, not knowing the conversations that are going on behind the scenes about, potential first round picks getting more play time. And if there's any kind of pressure of that nature, we don't know about. But at the same time, I do think there is faith, David, that Tom Telesco is actually getting better at this. He is learning from the process of drafting bad players, and that can help him have one of his best seasons so far in the draft coming up on Thursday.
Well, he's going to have 10 opportunities to change our mind, Daniel.
This is coming from the guy that wrote 8,000 words on criticizing basically every draft class he ever had. So
right. And yeah, he's going to have 10 stabs at it, but there is no question that he was absolutely defensive about that question. And you don't really see that response a whole lot.
He got it together quickly.
Yeah, he got it together quickly, but he let a little bit of that show.
Oh, yeah.
It definitely it stung. It stung.
I had a perfect reenactment. That's exactly how I said it. No, I'm just
kidding. Absolutely, but I mean, hey, Tom Telesco, this is your job, man. This is one of the biggest aspects of how you are going to be evaluated. It's wins, obviously, championships, and division titles. And your draft classes, right? Like that's your job. And unfortunately, your high-end talent, I mean, hey, you have a lot of feathers in your cap as far as first-round picks are concerned. No
but question. The other two are indisputably bad, right? Because, I mean, you can point to some draft talent that the Chargers have brought in, especially on the top end. You drafted Joey Bosa. You drafted Keenan Allen. You drafted Mike Williams and Darwin James and Rashawn Slater and all of these really good players.
Justin Herbert.
But you can't point to the success on the football field at all for Tom Telesco. And that's the tough thing, because it's like, how many division titles has Tom Telesco won in his 9 seasons?
Right. 0.
It rhymes with hero.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really like one. I mean, that's not good enough. It's 2 playoff appearances. It's 2 playoff wins with Phillip Rivers, right? 0 appearances in the 2 years with Justin Herbert, which is, I'm not, putting
and you
on
selecting
him.
Justin Herbert is going to get you a little bit more time, right?
It already has.
In the seat for sure. But I mean, now if you don't win, like you don't get another coach, Tom. Like this is
right.
it.
I mean, you would think so.
Yeah, you would hope. Like this is the end of the line. Now it's got to turn into results. It's got to turn into wins, titles, and championships. It has to happen.
It has to. And that's the thing, though, is just like, and if you're a Chargers fan, you have to hope. I mean, you're perfectly able to be critical of Tom Telesco, and you should be for some of the picks that he's made. But at the same time, like, you don't want to be the team that keeps turning that position over, right? You want to find the combo of the coach and the GM and keep that together as long as possible, and as long as some of these storied franchises around the NFL and the mostly successful franchises have done it. Yeah. It's not with a ton of turnover. It's finding the right combination of guys. And if Tom Telesco can suddenly become that guy with Brandon Staley, that's the best case scenario, because I believe in Brandon Staley as a coach, and Tom Telesco has a chance to make me believe in Tom Telesco as not just a first-round drafter, but somebody who's going to hit on some more picks than that in the upcoming draft. And he has a chance to do it. We'll see how it all turns out, and we'll have to obviously wait a while to see how these picks end up playing out. But we don't have to wait a while to see who they will pick, because the draft is coming up on Thursday night. We will have a show on Thursday night for you. But we also have tomorrow's show, guys, where we're going to be making our final predictions on the Chargers' first-round picks. So that will be, I mean, that has to be on the show tomorrow, and we'll talk about what else we think could happen on Thursday night and how we're feeling about the draft on the final show before the big draft in Las Vegas. I'm excited about that. Make sure you guys check in, and to make sure you don't miss it, make sure you go subscribe to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and also follow the show for free on all platforms wherever you get your podcast from, because you'll be getting an early show. The Friday show is going to be coming out on Thursday night, and you'll also probably get a bonus Saturday show as well for you guys after the Chargers pick on day 2. We're really excited to do some bonus content for you guys this week in the offseason. We appreciate everyone who's checking it out. And you can also make sure you don't miss it by following all of our social media. You can follow me on Twitter at DanTalkSports and David Droegemeier on Twitter at DroTalkSD. And you can also find the show's page at LockedOnLAC. You can also hit us up on our at Locked On Chargers Instagram page and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page too, where you can call into the Locked On Chargers voicemail line. Super excited to hear your guys' reactions to the draft picks. Make sure to call into 323-524-7924 to get your voicemail on the show. But that is going to do it for today's show. It's right around the corner, guys. We're getting so close to the draft, so make sure you're back here tomorrow to get into our final predictions on the big day tomorrow. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.